Welcome to the Rider's Edge podcast, a platform to share conversations about the health and wellness of horse and rider. I'm your host, Farley Schweigert. Hey y'all, it's Farley with Rider's Edge podcast, and today I'm going to talk about the power of the glute, or glutes as we should say. There's a lot of muscles in your caboose. We're going to talk about the glute muscles. There are three muscles that make up the gluteus complex. You probably know about the gluteus maximus. It's probably the one official muscle name that you learned in school and had lots of jokes about it. If you want anatomy jokes, just hang out with some PTs, particularly some first year PTs. They'll come up with some good jokes for you as they're trying to study all the parts of the anatomy. The second muscle that is part of it is called the glute medius, and then you have the glute minimus. So you have three muscles: the maximus, the medius, and the minimus. It makes up a powerhouse of muscles that we often find not working correctly. So I've talked about this before on the podcast, but it's an important subject and we should talk about it in depth. So a lot of people work on their glutes because, maybe they want a J-Lo booty or a Kim Kardashian booty or whatever. But that's not really what I'm focused on here today. I'm focused on the function of the glute muscles, why they're important to your health, and how they're important to your riding. So our glute muscles are often weak, and they become weak to the point that they turn off. There's a term called gluteal amnesia, and it just talks about the lack of activation of the muscles. These muscles can become so weak that they just literally don't turn on. And like we've talked about before, the body will find a way to get the job done. So if they don't turn on, another group of muscles will take over. Most of the time, that's the hamstrings. And this can be problematic for a lot of different reasons. So if your glute muscles are weak, you might have what's called the lower crossed body syndrome. It's a term where we draw an X through the lower body to show the relationship of these core muscles that we've been talking about the last few weeks. If your glutes are weak, typically your abdominals are weak. If those two are weak, then your hip flexors are tight and your back muscles are tight. So it just kind of goes along an X right there to show the inverse relationship of those sets of muscles in this process. When your glutes are weak, you can set your body up for issues, both up the chain and down the chain. When your glutes are weak, over time, you can set yourself up for low back pain because your pelvis is the foundation of your lumbar spine and your whole spine. So if it's not stabilizing like it should, then it's going to find some stabilization somewhere else in muscles or other tissue that's not their primary job. And over time, that's going to break down and cause pain. If your glutes are weak, you can, again, we talked about the tight hip flexors. So if your glutes are weak and your hip flexors are tight, you're always in this kind of bent position. And you may be sitting there driving the car going, well, Farrells, nobody walks around in a bent hip position. It can be not a whole lot of difference. It can be just a few degrees and it can make a big difference. I'm not talking about, having an old granny walk where you're bent over, or that question mark walk I talk about with guys who have low back pain. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just a a few degrees of tightness, never allowing your hip to get into full extension. So you never get through the full range of motion of your hip joint. This can cause problems in your hip joint later on. Additionally, weak glutes can cause knee problems. What? And you just thought you had genetically bad knees, or you played sports as a kid, or you did this or you did that. No, it can be from weak glutes. Because of the glutes not activating correctly, the tracking of the knee can be off, causing issues to build up over time, particularly behind your kneecap. In addition, it can just cause that overall janky, gross, painful knee issue. Because let's think about this in the relationship of glutes and knees. Think about going up a flight of stairs. Yes, people still do this a lot. They don't always ride elevators. If your glutes are not working to push you up those stairs, then the front of your body is going to have to pull you up. That's going to be your quads, that's going to be your hip flexors, and all that, and your knee joint. If you're walking down that same flight of stairs, if you are walking down and you say, Farley, my knees hurt more when I walk downstairs than when I do going up, I would say, of course they do, because you are relying on a very basic joint, a hinge joint that really only has 2 degrees of freedom in it, to slow down the acceleration of your body, instead of having your glutes working to take a lot of that load off, which is what they're built for. Then your knees are going to get cranky because they're having to stop that acceleration of your body from falling on your face, going down the stairs. I mean, if you're like me, graceful like myself, I typically trip going upstairs. Still not real sure how you get that done, but I've done it several times throughout my life. I know. I get some kind of award for that, I'm sure. Weak glutes can be attributed to our lifestyle. It can be attributed to having jobs that are sedentary. Even if you don't have a job that's sedentary, you typically want to come home and sit and Netflix and chill, or sit on the couch or in the recliner or whatever. And it can be a problem, because it never gets activated. And in that seated position, it's always on a stretch. Your glutes are always on a stretch, and your hamstrings are always contracted. So your hamstrings, not only are they overactive and they're tight, but because of those two things together, they are naturally going to do more than they should. So it's a huge thing. Now, here's the deal. You can't think your glutes better. I wish you could. You can think about, just like you think about a cute set of glutes all day, if you're about crushing on somebody or whatever, it's not gonna make them any more real than thinking about your own glutes working correctly. So it takes practicing motor control. It takes practicing activating, getting quiet, getting in a space where you can really work on activating those glutes, and start to understand the difference between your glutes being activated and your hamstrings doing the job. A lot of times when we're in the gym, you're doing very glute specific exercises. You may be listening to me right now saying, Farles, I do this, this, and this, and this for my glutes. And my question to you is, okay, but do you? Do you know for a fact that you are activating your glutes first? Have you broken that motor pattern to where you are actually getting activation? Because the body's super sneaky. The body is super good at taking the least energy expensive way to get the job done. It's kind of a little bit lazy that way. So you could be doing just a bang up job in the gym doing these exercises and not be getting what needs to get got. It could be very, very sneaky. Very, very, very sneaky. And the problem with activating the glutes is you've got to time it to where you're working on activation of them while working on some active deactivation of the hamstrings and the quads, possibly. So, that can look at some static stretching, but there's a lot of dynamic exercises you can do as well. And if you really kind of start getting that balance going of activating the glutes while deactivating the hamstrings or quads or whatever it may be, then you really can get that snowball rolling down the hill correctly this time. So it's another tricky thing. And this is not just specific to riders. This is specific to all Americans. I had this glute conversation with clients over the years. It is one of the most frustrating things that I teach. For some people, it is one of the hardest parts of body awareness for them to obtain. Because when we're in the gym, when we're doing things, it's a lot easier to get through a task that we don't care for by distraction, by listening to music or a podcast, or keep listening to mine while you're working out because you may get some tips in there. But we distract ourselves with the TV in the gym or our music or podcast or an audiobook to get through, quote unquote, the unpleasant activity of exercising. But it takes some time. It takes some patience with yourself, and it takes consistency. And it can just be a little bit here and there. It can be, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day. It can be before you get out of bed in the morning, when you get back in bed at night, working on those muscles and working on making sure you're not recruiting other muscles. It'll take some time. And it's a tricky thing about our glutes and riding. So I just said, well, your glutes become weak from sitting if you have a desk jockey job. On top of that, we're a very mobile society. We drive for a commute, or we drive across country to go to a rodeo or a horse show, and we're in the truck for 8+ hours at a time and don't think anything of it. So if you're sitting there going, okay, you're talking about sitting being bad, we sit on a horse. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And it takes activation, a lot of activation off of the horse to get that to key in on the horse. The first place that I noticed a real improvement in my glutes, which helped my riding, was when I was posting at a trot. I finally felt like I was pushing my pelvis forward instead of pulling myself forward. And once I finally felt that sensation, I realized I was pulling myself forward from my upper body. Even from my neck muscles. I have a real bad habit of starting motions with my upper body. And I think a contributing factor to that is not having the correct balanced core, having weak glutes, tight hip flexors, weak abdominals, even though in my Superman syndrome, I would say, well, I may not have the strongest abs, but I don't have the weakest abs. I don't sit on the couch and eat bonbons all day. But again, it takes motor planning, it takes motor activation, and then it gets to strengthening. So I really started feeling that when I was posting in a trot. It became a lot more effortless. It was a lot easier. I felt lighter in the saddle. And I don't know, I just kind of felt like, oh, I could get back in an English saddle and go ride English on the flat. I'm not a jumper, but and it's talking more about hunt under saddle, hunting equitation. Oh, I could go do this. This has gotten so much easier. That's not the only place that I think that's the first place you'll notice your glutes working, because it's the same thing that my clients would say in the gym. They would get up off the table after we finally got the neurons to fire correctly. It takes a while, folks. It really does. And my patients would get off the table and they would walk across the gym and they would say the same kind of thing. They would say, I feel lighter. I feel like I'm just kind of gliding through air. I feel like I'm kind of pushing myself forward instead of pulling myself forward. And that pulling motion really typically will come from the quads. People are typically weak in their abdominals. Not always, but that lower cross to body syndrome has been researched for a very long time. And it is, it's pretty true. You can have great abdominals and still have weak glutes and a whole combination of things. But my patients would say, "Oh, someone would just flat out say it's just easier to walk. It is easier to walk." So I felt that same sensation when posting a trot. I also have felt that become a little bit easier and taking that hit coming out of the box. Your glutes help with extension of the hip. So extension is coming back, or it's straightening out. So it's going from a flexed position, where you're sitting back there, you're kind of in a posterior pelvic tilt, you're on the back of your saddle, and you allow that horse to rock your body forward to stand up and be able to rope. So it's helped stabilize there. Other places you're really going to see it help stabilize. You're going to see it stabilize for calf ropers getting off their horses. Goat tires, same thing. Bulldoggers. Team ropers, it's going to be being able to stand up more stable to throw your rope, along with any of the roping disciplines. Singling out team ropers, because if I think about them as maybe compared to calf ropers or breakaway ropers, at certain ropings, different things, they can be standing up for longer periods of time. Of course, all this is in milliseconds, right? As everything keeps getting faster, tougher, stronger, higher. There's some song about that I've tried to make a joke with and completely butchered it per use. But you get the picture. If you are sitting there going, well, Farrells, that's great, but I'm not a timed event person. Well, you're still going to notice it. If you're in the show ring, you're going to notice that your pelvis is more stable. Your pelvis is more stable and it's able to stay more erect, more upright. And so you're going to have different bracing happen, because if this massive amount of muscle tissue, and it is massive amount of muscle tissue no matter what size your booty is working correctly, then it's going to help keep all that stable you're going to be able to keep and maintain your riding posture a lot better without having breakdown of your low back getting sore, or even your upper back or a shoulder, and you'll be able to stop with the okay, the weird cues that we give our riders often to get the look, quote unquote, of what proper riding is, instead of really diving into developing that musculature. Oh, lead with your left shoulder, or, slightly twist here, or whatever. You've heard them. You've probably said them to help somebody else out. Now, the important thing too to know in stronger glutes, what also should happen is that if you are a rider who has trouble leaning, that can often be a sign of weak glutes, weak abdominals, which can translate into weak glutes. Remember the crossed syndrome there. We can start breaking that habit of leading with your shoulders. One of my friends said the other day that your shoulders shouldn't arrive before your hips. And what a great way to say that. What a wonderful way to put that visual. KK Rule was talking about that in barrel racing, and just having that conversation of don't let your shoulders arrive before your hips do. So for people, again, like me, I struggle with this. I struggled with this with my mare. I find myself still struggling with this in the rope pen. I start leading with my shoulders, and then I get out over my horse, and a couple of things happen. My tip goes wonky, and it's not swinging at my target, and I miss my target, which is a moving calf most of the time. And in that scenario, often because I'm riding an old calf horse, he stops, and he stops short because he's been trained to stop when you lean out over him. Because he is an exceptional calf horse. And so then it goes down the hill quickly. Is it going to stop all the problems? No. But your glutes are a major factor, and they're a major factor that we're not talking about in the physical responsibility of the rider. It's a major set of muscles that can have a lot of health benefits, or not taking care of this set of muscles can contribute to a lot of health problems, both up the chain and down the chain orthopedically. And we don't have this conversation well as a society of talking about this when you are in a position to do something about it. Boy, howdy, we'll talk about this when you complain about the pain so much that the promise of a surgery to fix it sounds really appealing, because our healthcare system is designed to take care of the sick and not prevent the sick and take care of the well. So it's very backwards. So talking about this now, no matter what your age is, you can work on your glutes and contribute to having a healthier musculoskeletal system. And whether you end up stopping what you have been learned by watching your grandparents and your parents and aunts and uncles of inevitable fate of growing old, that, oh, you're just going to have these surgeries. Oh, they do replacements now. So by the time it's time for me to have it replaced, we'll just get it replaced. So having those thoughts kind of embedded in you. It's not something we talk about often, but you see that behavior modeled in your older family members, your older friends, and you're just like, well, it'll just happen to me too. It doesn't have to. On the flip side of that, no matter what your age is, you can work on these things. And whether you are kind of bumping into those decisions of should I have a surgery or not, doing this, moving better, improving your movement has huge benefits. It may delay a surgery, and you may be able to work all the way through it, even though you've been told, oh, if this doesn't work, we need to go have surgery. Just a huge amount of food for thought. Because a small amount of work, a small amount of activation can have huge benefits for you in the arena and in the health arena, and taking care of your body and providing longevity for your sport, your livelihood, and just being able to be active and do other hobbies as well. So I hope today, just talking about the power of the glute, might have been a little bit mind-opening for you and giving you a little bit of, I don't know about my glutes. I don't know. This all makes sense, but I don't know. If that's you, give me a call, send me an email, message me, send a carrier pigeon, smoke signal, whatever you want. And let's talk about it. And let's talk about getting your body working the way it needs to so that you can go reach your goals, whatever they may be. Having somebody on your team that really understands what you're doing and where you're going is just as important for you as it is your horse, because the physical responsibility of the rider is often overlooked. It is often overlooked and underestimated. We will run to the vet, we'll shell out the money for the vet, and then we'll take 2 ibuprofen or 4 or 8 or gosh knows what number. And the answer often, more times than not, is movement and correct movement. So if you're needing help with those kinds of things, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you or get you to somebody who can help you and help you reach your goals and return to winning. So thank you as always for tuning in today. And as always, I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to Rider's Edge Podcast. For show notes and other thoughts, head over to ridersedgetherapy.com. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, head over to my free Facebook group, Rider's Edge Health and Wellness for Horse and Rider. Thanks for continuing the conversation, and as always, I will see you down the road.